Namaskar everyone, this is Shashank Bhavaraju. We welcome all of you to the third episode of Data Talk series by Data Reveals. We have some esteemed panelists with us. We'll very soon get started in hearing from them. What we're going to be discussing today is to get a sense of India's sustainable living philosophy, whether it should drive our current climate policy, and in general go a little deeper into what practices India has always been following, how sustainable they are, and what is it that we can continue to learn from our ancient Indian principles and philosophy, as well as if there's something that the world can learn from us, as well as something that we can learn from the world. So to discuss this, we have a I would say, uh, some people, three of you who really don't need an introduction. I think for the small 1% of population who don't know who Hemaji, Hariji, and Rahulji are, I just would give a couple of lines of introduction. We have Rahul Goswami with us, who is a UNESCO Asia expert facilitator on intangible cultural heritage, and an advisor to the Center of Environmental Education Himalaya. Thanks, Rahulji, for joining us. We also have Shri D.K. Hariji and Hemaji, both of whom have very kind enough to join us. Again, they're erstwhile management and IT professionals, respectively, conceptualizers and founders of BharathGyan. Many of you would have heard of BharathGyan or read BharathGyan. You would have some YouTube short story or a video of theirs would have gotten shared to you on WhatsApp before. So BharathGyan is an initiative on Indian civilization study, started way back in 2000, about 21 years ago, doing terrific stuff. They've compiled a lot on authentic Indian knowledge from multiple disciplines, from multiple geographies, millennia, across years, and putting all of that together in the form of books, in the form of videos and short films for all of us to consume. So thanks to the three of you for all you do for us in general, and as well as for joining us today. Right, we'll get started. I don't think I've done a very good job of introducing the three of you because there's so much to talk about you, but the world will know as we get into the conversation as to what is it that you offer to us. So I'll quickly get started. In terms of format, this is the structure we've been following all this while, wherein it's an informal conversation. So I'm going to maybe just ask some questions, feel absolutely free to chime in with your thoughts, and feel absolutely free to discuss with each other. So the question I have, I'll get started with perhaps the question for the couple we have here, Hariji and Hemaji. And this has been something that I've been trying to understand. I have a view, but I'm sure you have a lot more to add, which is basically about our core Indic principles and practices, let's say for agriculture, let's say for lifestyle in general. What do you think of it? How sustainable do you think they are? And could we call ourselves naturally woke? And if, based on your views on these, would also love to understand is there something that the world can borrow from our Indic principles and philosophies? So Hariji and Hemaji, over to you.
Thank you, Shashank Bhavaraju, for inviting us to be part of Data Reveals. And it will be our pleasure to discuss with this team and with this team to ask a very good question about agriculture. We'll take since it's going to be a very short program, we'll just take one key highlight about agriculture that most of us may not be aware of, that India civilization has had agriculture for many years, millennia. If you look at Balarama, the brother of Krishna, his Ayuda is not a bow and arrow or something. Of course, he was a great mace, gada wielder, but more importantly, you show a hala Ayuda, a plow. That means plowing was something, the way he designed the plow and gave to us was something beautiful, and that's been there with us for the last 5,100 years and more, sustaining the civilization. That's one key aspect. So you see it in the iconography itself so beautifully in the way it's been depicted. That's one. And the other key point on sustainability is, you see, this is one land where we have 3 harvests in a year. Where what we call as teen bog. In Urdu and Hindi, we call it fasal. Earlier, we used to call it bog. We had teen bog. That's why you see If you look at Europe, because of winters, and North America again because winters, you can have at best one or at best two harvests in a year. Very few lands can speak about three harvests. So this land has been fortunate right from early days for millennia to have three harvests. And that's why we look at the festival that we have before Shankranti Pongal. We call it Bogi. Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, all this we call it Bogi. It means Bog. If you go to Utkala, Odisha, the prasad we give to Puri Jagannath is Chapan Bog. So 56 varieties of sweets. If you go to Bengal and Assam, you call it Bohali Bihu. Bohali. So the word Bog is so much there all across the land. You see, so Bog means teen Bog we have. And not only this, there's a wonderful ratio of 3 into 3 into 3, which makes it sustainable. 1 by 3 into 1 by 3 into 1 by 3. We'll see that now in a slide. As to how this land has kept it sustainable across millennia. Look at it's a simple but such a nice practice of keeping it sustainable. We'll just show you a few very simple slides on that subject of agriculture, especially because of which we have very high yield in agriculture. Look at this. We have terms for this 1/3 concept. We call it teen bogam, teen bagam, and teen bagam. Bag is 3 portions. Teen bog. That is. So look at this slide now. So when you have a crop, be it paddy or wheat or anything else, the top 1/3 is for humans, like the anaj, okay, the gehu and all that. The middle 1/3 is for the animals, like we have straw, hay, etc. The bottom 1/3, the stump and the roots, is to be plowed back into the land. So 1/3 is back to the land. So and there's kahavat for this in Bengali, Assamese, Telugu, Tamil, Odia. Every language has a kahavat to say 1/3 for humans, 1/3 for the animals, 1/3 for the back into the land. But unfortunately, what have we done now in the name of modern agriculture? We started burning that 2/3. We only take the 1/3 avariciously, only for humans, have enough, put so much pesticides that we don't allow all the other birds and bees also to share it. And we burn the balance. So we don't give it back to the land also. Next slide. Look at this. Then there's another 1/3 that we have. 1/3 of the produce of the 1/3 that comes the top 1/3, the grains, only 1/3 goes to the landowner. 1/3 goes to the water provider. 1/3 goes to the tiller. So it was an equitable distribution. So a landowner did not get a substantially high share. And the tiller, his sweat and blood was valued. And he was getting 1/3. And look at this. There's 1/3 for water provider. So they recognized how important water was for agriculture. And that was what was the beauty of what they were doing. One more.
Fascinating, sir.
Isn't it? So look at
Yeah, and the point that I would like to emphasize on when you say about the ancient Indian civilization itself, the nature, the psyche of the civilization. In one word, if we want to summarize, we can say it is a saving civilization. So, and with the word saving, you get sustainable. Because sustainable is all about saving, keeping it safe, protected, and alive.
Better for next generation.
And how do we get, and we always say, everywhere you say, oh, Indians, Desis, oh, they'll always save. They'll save all their monies. They'll save every little thing, every little penny. I mean, of course, you also say that the Scots and the Dutch are thrift. You use the word thrift there, but here you use the word saving. And if you fundamentally look at it, this idea of saving, we save money, we save gold, we save so many things. Where does that idea of saving come from? It comes from the fact that we have always saved something as simple and elemental as water. From the idea that we have to save water. We have rains, actually. It's a beautiful, the whole idea about our civilization is so integrated and such a beautiful story. And at parts, it's very touching because this land is very blessed to be in a position such that it gets rains every year, unfailingly. Every year in June, you get your monsoon. But you get it only for 3 months. And in that 3 months, you get it only actually on an average. I'm sure Rahul ji will be able to give more data statistics. Exactly 100 hours of rain on an average over the country.
1 second.
And
when she said 100 hours of rain, I want to ask you one question. How many hours are there in a day? 24. How many hours are there in a week? Into 7.
Yeah.
How many hours are there in a year? Into 365.
So it comes to actually 8,760 hours in a year. And imagine it actually rains from the sky. The precipitation is only for 100 hours on an average overall in the land. So for 8,660 hours, we have to store and use that water. And this is what our ancients had understood beautifully. They had experienced it and they had understood it, and they had therefore worked around it, because without storing and not, you can't manage for the remaining 8,660 hours, which are huge amount of time. And so when you start saving every boon, then you start saving everything else, including the planet. So the idea of sustainability is inbuilt into our psyche.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Rahulji, I rather than move on to the next question, I just wanted to check if there is something you have to add on the topic of Indian agricultural principles as well as lifestyle in general, the core Indic principles.
Well, I'm happy that Hari and Hemaji mentioned the use of pesticides, which is really a subject by itself, which needs to be understood. That how did we even come to this? How did we even come to what we say we are heirs of this civilization, and we are using chemical pesticides which is poisoning every single district, with the recent exception of 4 districts of Sikkim, which declared themselves organic about 4 years ago, and probably a few more which I'm not aware of. But what about the rest, where let alone for food staples, for even for their own sustainability, for their own survival, the reliance is in fact on pesticides, so chemical pesticides and chemical fertilizer, which we should never have come to at this stage. And just to illustrate that, for about, I'm trying to keep with the raison d'etre of your organization, which is Data Reveals, which is that for the 3 years until 2018-19, approximately 60,000 tons of pesticides were used in India. The majority by Uttar Pradesh and by Maharashtra, about 11,000 tons by Uttar Pradesh, about 15,000 tons by Maharashtra. So, of course, these are both big states, and it varies within the states. But, 60,000 tons doesn't sound like a lot in terms of a volume of any substance. But when it comes to pesticides, it's lethal. 66 of the world's most dangerous pesticides, some of which began to be phased out in the early 1980s in Europe, continue to be illegally manufactured and marketed in India.
Wow.
And this is something that unfortunately totally overturns everything that Hari and Hemaji spoke about just now, which is about the 3 parts of the food crop. When those pesticides get into those 3 parts, then nothing should eat them, nothing should consume them. They should not be plowed back into the soil. They should not be used as a raw food, which is converted into cooked food, and so on and so forth. But we've come to this. I mean, I don't want to sound pessimistic about this, but we need to call a spade, and we need to see, we need to understand that we have this burden today of the misuse, the misadoption of a technology that is never ours.
Sure, sure. And so
Point.
Rahulji,
If I may add a point
I go ahead, Hariji.
Rahul ji brought a very nice point about pesticides. See, our Indian ethos of sustainable living had a clear point. Whatever crop that Mother Earth gave us with our effort of tilling and irrigating, etc., we were psychologically, mentally, spiritually, consciously, everywhere willing to keep aside 1/3 for animals, birds, bees. So that was part of the ethos. We kept what we said, only 1/3 of it is for us, 1/3 of it is for all other prani, be it bugs to earthworms to sparrows to everybody. So that was a large heartedness that we had. So we were seeing a larger perspective. So what Mother Earth gave it's so we had a philosophy of live and let live, sharing. That is fundamentally. Now what's happened is everything is mine. Whatever is grown is all mine. So there's I'm sure you'd have heard of a saying in Telugu, Meedante Madi. Isn't it? Everything is yours is mine. So it's become a precious. Madi kuda Madi. What is mine is mine. What is yours is also mine. So look at the sense of avariciousness that has all come into us in the last century or less than that. It's not part of the Indian sustainable way of living, because you have to have your birds, bees, you've got to have your sparrows, you've got to have earthworms, everything to have a sustainable ecosystem. And that's where we said 1/3, 1/3.
Sure. Fascinating. And this is interesting. So on the topic of sustainable lifestyle, just not agriculture, going beyond agriculture as well, is there anything, and this is so that there are proper takeaways that are implementable by our audience, and therefore the question that I'm going to have is there anything that we did in the past that all of us right now should immediately start following? So is it could anything that you'd want to add?
Yes, what Dr. Hema said about water harnessing, about 100 hours of rain and 8,660 hours we have to save it and use it, all that. We had a very simple principle. That is, this is enunciated by Varaha Mihira couple of millennia back in the text called Brihat Samhita. It's there in many places, but also he's also said it much later. Much later is few millennia ago.
Sure.
Few thousand years ago. Okay, what he said is, in a land, she can show you the slide now, in a land, 1/6 of the land mass, wherever you live, be it a city or a village or wherever you live, should be kept aside for water bodies.
Water bodies, okay.
Open surface water bodies. They did not talk about closed surface water bodies. Open water bodies, 1/6 of it should be kept. And we'll show you that. So, especially today, when we're talking about smart cities and all that, this gets all the more importance. Let's see this. Everywhere, be it, this is so it could be the smart city, could be university. Look at this. 1/6 is water bodies, 1/6 is for greenery, 1/6 is for residential, 1/6 for commercial, 1/6 for service utilities, and 1/6 for transport connectivity. So look at this. They had a 1/6 ratio. While they had a 1/3 ratio of agriculture, they had a 1/6 ratio for living areas. And this is there right from the days of the Ayodhya to Dwaraka days to now. Look at this connectivity.
Actually, very beautiful two aspects, that come out of this. One is, as a water body itself, the land, overall land, 1/6 had to be set aside for water. And you have to set aside 1/6 for greenery, which we used to call gaucher. These two have totally vanished. And from today's picture, you hardly have these two. And we may argue that we bring water through pipes and things like that. But we may argue that we are bringing all of this. But what is 1/6 of water, exposed surface water does? It creates, it allows, today, there is one thing, we say that we are getting into closed loop systems and things like that, where we want to prevent evaporation loss and so on. But in olden times, actually, they encouraged evaporation also. So the moment you have 1/6 water body, there is enough evaporation so that that brings down the temperature of the place. It adds moisture to the air. Your crops grow better. You get a better yield. So overall, the whole place becomes a little more salubrious. Whereas now you've made it so dry. There is no surface water. By piping everything, you remove that need for surface water. So you're really defeating your own goals and your own comfort.
Look at this. Those days you did not have air condition, but the surface water of 1/6 gave you that AC feeling. They give you humidity, what in Hindi and other languages you call as nami. That nami helps you grow bigger fruit, helps you grow bigger flowers, helps you grow bigger grains, helps the birds and all the flora and fauna to survive. So there was nami in the air. That gave humidity. That what it do down? It brought down the temperature, ambient temperature by 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. So the area was livable, salubrious. Even in a tropical area, it was livable, salubrious.
So
You use the word salubrious sometimes, but you notice, so that's so nice.
So if you talk about climate change, I think this is one of the simplest and easiest steps to do. Of course, you have to get around various other procedures to be able to allocate that 1/6 land for water.
Sure.
But if you do that itself, your climate improves a lot.
And before the British came here, she showed 1/3 is for 1/6 is for water, 1/6 is for green areas. Okay, these green areas, when the British came here, they said it's all community lands, gauchar, or what you call in South Indian and East Indian languages, samudaya fields, samudaya, because it belonged to Samaj. So it was not owned by a person, but owned by the community collectively. That was what they did. And there was a British officer by name Pembroke. Came about 200 years back. He said there's nothing like community lands. All the community lands belongs to the government. So he took over all the community lands by an order of the pen. And all these lands were maintained by locals as hinterland for the water to flow into the 1/6 water bodies, was summarily taken over by him and made into governmental lands. So do you know what happened? So the lands taken over by Pembroke, in Tamil and Telugu and few other languages, they came to be in the anglicized name, corrupted into Indian name, got the name Poromboku.
Really?
Yes, it came. And Poromboku, when you looked aghast, what does it mean? Poromboku is today a very abusive word.
It's a
Correct.
Derogatory. You want to scold somebody, you call him Poromboku.
It's like an outcast.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
You're
So,
a wastrel,
so-
then you say Porambok.
Oh,
what was your
that also
orchard land?
explains. That also explains
your-
man. It also explains man. So he's the Porambok, the first Poramboku.
Yeah, he's a man who created the Porambok clan of Poramboks. So, what was actually community lands? What were lands for rainwater harvesting? What were lands for orchards? What were lands for community
Sure.
grazing? What were land for children to play? All that were sort of confiscated because he didn't understand. Because there was an idea of terra nullius. They practiced in Australia to de-enfranchise the Aborigines. I'm sure you must have heard of the terra nullius concept. Similarly, they applied it in India through this Pembroke law. And they took over the land. So that's when it was a big blow. Your water harvesting was cut off then. That's another point. We will get to the next point. We'll get on to that.
Certainly. So I just want to bring in Rahulji into this. I did have a couple of questions, Rahulji, and I wanted to give some data points here. One of them is about water withdrawal. So the water withdrawal is essentially the quantity of water withdrawn for agricultural, industrial, and municipal purposes. So globally, there's a metric that's published, and all the countries are measured on that. So India averages at 602 cubic metric tons per person per year. Now, this is at the global average, right? At the global average, we are at the global average. Given that a lot of Indic principles and policies are generally considered sustainable, one thing is, I know we've borrowed from others as well, but we'll help to understand what do you see as the reason why we've gone bad at water withdrawal. But along with that, I'll also quickly throw in another small number, which again connects very quickly back to water. Is India's meat consumption averages at 3.7 kgs per capita per person per year. And this is 2017 data, not that I expect it to have changed a lot. while countries like UK, US, Australia, etc., are close to 100 kgs per person and per capita, per year. Now, there's also something. There's a huge popular Netflix movie called Game Changers. It was a documentary which brought into public light on how much of water gets consumed to put 1 pound of beef on the table. It apparently is about 1,800 gallons per a pound of beef, and corn, on the contrary, for example, takes about 100 gallons. Now, given the agricultural principles, given that we have sustainable principles, etc., why is it that we are just at the average when it comes to water withdrawal? And what is it that we can do better in the future in addition to rainwater harvesting? Just wanted to get your sense and your thoughts on that, Rahulji.
Yeah. So, did you say 6 point something cubic meters?
602 cubic meters per person per year.
Cubic meters per person per year. Well, I mean, I don't know what to say about those figures, because those can vary from authority to authority. We have no way of finding out whether any of them is within 10% of truth. And even if any of them is within 10% of truth, we have, according to our, let's see, in 1980s, when we started cartographically dividing mainland India, so excluding the island, into agroecological regions, there was around 124 to 126 of these, and each
Sure.
of them would probably have a different measure, and within each of them, depending on every river basin, its annual flows, we would have different measures at different times of the year. So I know that you all are interested in data, but I wouldn't set much store by this number at all. I think because, in the first place, this is something that when I used to work for 5 years with the government of India Krishi Mantralaya program,
Sure.
the idea of a national average used to always come up, and I used to do my best to say, look, forget about your national average, it means nothing. Because if you're talking about a national average to a farmer in Vidarbha, and one in Kamrup, and one in the Jammu Valley, and one in Tirunelveli, he's going to tell you, look, what bothers me and what concerns me is what I do in my village, in my panchayat, with the rest of my kisans. I couldn't care less about your national average, and I completely agree with him. So
Sure.
leave that aside. I think what I would suggest is probably we need to go back again to, in the way that Hariji and Hemaji just described about the 1/6 allocations of land. We need to go back to what were the ways in which we considered water in terms of where it fell and what we did with it where it fell. Is if you look at many of our metros, which have grown substantially in terms of the spatial or reach, or the spatial annexation of the surrounding topography, these have actually encroached and completely taken over not only just lakes and ponds and water bodies, but also entire fluvial systems which are passing through this region, which has become a city, which has to supply some other region somewhere. So all those get interrupted, and that's why you get these floods and these inundations of urban spaces every now and then. So we have, I would say, completely lost the ability to judge how water behaves on our surfaces which are not treated, and how it behaves on our surfaces which are treated. And when I say treated, I mean the myriad of water containment and storage structures. Hemaji referred to that. We stored water as if it was gold. We wanted to save it. It was more than gold. I mean, Robert Sewell, he has written extensively on Vijayanagar. Vijayanagar, I mean, everybody knows it's in a semi-arid region. Although, yes, it hugged the bank of a river, but it hugged the bank of a river and it was picturesque and it was lovely so long as there was water in the river. And there wasn't water in the river all months of the year. When it wasn't, what happened? But the enormous civilization that was Vijayanagar depended on the way in which they treated water where it fell. And as they said with the 100 hours explanation, what they did with it during the time that it was available. So this has a great deal to do with being more sensitive, being more observant about what to do with water when it falls. And even after it is used in a field, it still has a use. At the end of the field, at the runoff from the field, it still has a use. It goes into a swamp, it goes into a wetland, and so on. You know, the Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka is very often cited as one example of a hydrological society. So is the Khmer, which is in Cambodia, which is the 9th to 12th century when it gave rise to Angkor Thom and Angkor Wat. So, which was completely based on the management and maintenance of water. So, you know, when Hariji talked about 3 harvests a year, these are areas which also did 3 harvests a year based on what they learned from us. And what they learned from us is what they learned from our major river deltas. So the Mahanadi, the Periyar, the Krishna, the Godavari, and of course the Ganga. And so I think what has been completely missing since well, I mean, in terms of what we say is independent India since 1947, but certainly before that, when the plantation India was part of the locus of colonial British regime, is that we totally lost sight of what water means to us as a temporal substance, as a spiritual substance, as a transfer of nutrients, as the manifestation, because all our rivers are deities, as a manifestation of the divine on our surface. And to dam those manifestations, to dam with concrete and cement, is appalling. It is a gross insult, which we have adopted against the West. And we think this is progress. So, I mean, we have to go back to a number of what are taught and what are given as training as fundamental concepts, and these are not fundamental at all. These are appalling concepts because they go totally against our culture.
Sure. Fascinating. Hemaji, you've been wanting to say something, please.
Yeah, because what Rahulji was saying, like it was just almost as though he was talking about what we had wanted to talk as well, and we have a beautiful slide to just reinforce what he's just saying. I mean, we couldn't have agreed more. And there is one other beautiful point. He said Vijayanagar, it was hugging the river and all that. If you really look at our civilization, our ancestors, see, fundamentally, most of the ancient civilizations, you can say they have flourished along river banks. But because of this water harnessing knowledge and capability and realization, as well as implementation, this Indian civilization has brought the rivers and waters to where they live.
Where we live.
Only on river banks alone. We have,
spread.
proliferated all over the land because of all these water harnessing systems which could harness the water where they fell. So that when he said that where they fell, the Tirunelveli man is concerned only with what falls there. Why is he bothered about what is falling in Jammu? So that we have two
Sure.
words for it, which we have coined much against the English dictionary. We call it decentralism and we call it indigenousism, not indigenousness, but the idea of indigenousism. What I need for my place, I will do it indigenously for my area.
With my topography, with my climate, with my thought process, with my skills.
And I was given the freedom to do it. That was the decentralism. So I
Can
was
I add?
allowed to
Can I
practice.
also add with my material, with my material.
Yes.
Yes,
skills,
with my material, my skills.
We have a slide.
And this point that he said so beautifully about the spirituality from, taking out the spirit and the spirituality from water. Just look at, I want to share the slide which, we talk about often.
Sure.
The key point that actually we prepared this, because this point most people are not even aware of that such a point exists. That is, for water, we have had twin blows. We are not even aware that we had twin blows. One is in 1857, it's a legal blow, and 100 years later, in 1950s, we had a second legal blow. What is the first legal blow? Till 1857, all of us know that year is very important for the first war of independence, or Sepoy Mutiny as they call it. Okay,
Yeah.
what before it? That's when the PWD department started with the PWD Act. Before that, there was no department. Why did they start the department? Because till then, all the waters, and we had 950,000 water bodies in India, recorded by the British then. Okay, all the water bodies were collectively and individually owned by the women of the land. That's the beauty of it. Okay, and from them, with a single act of the pen, all these water bodies were confiscated from the women of the land and taken control by the government and the PWD department by this PWD Act. So what was alienated from our culture, but actually controlled and owned by women, maintained by women. That's the key point we should know. Water, because the fertility is women. So that's why all the rivers, water bodies are known by women's name. 100 years later, again by few acts and again by legal pronouncements by courts, the de-divinization and secularization of waters happened consistently. So the waters which were divine in this land, Punya Tirtha we call it, were de-divinized and secularized. With this, we stopped giving. So one was by law, one see, look at this. One is by law, one is by mindset. So by this twin blow, actually, we are not even aware that we had these twin blows. Just not aware of it. So we want to graphically show it here. Both were legal. One 1857 by creating the PW department, and I often say this thing: till the women were handling the water bodies of the land, the water bodies were very well managed. So till the Miss was handling it, it was well managed. The moment it was wrested from the control of the Miss and given to the Mister, it became mismanaged, grossly mismanaged. So that is one. Second is the de-divinization of water and the secularization of water. That we started polluting it. If you were called it divine, if you looked at it as a mata, then you would not have added garbage to it. You would not have added pollutants to it. So these were the two things that have dealt a death knell to all the water bodies in India. And we had 950,000 water bodies in India. Are we aware of it? One small question I'm asking you. Okay, I've said we have a 950,000 water bodies. Fine. How many dwellings how many dwellings do we have in India? Any idea? Habitation, places? Villages? We have 6 lakh. 6 lakh plus. Because your pin code is 6 lakhs. Simple. There's no greater funda you needed. So, for 6 lakh habitations, we thought it fit to have 950,000 water bodies. That is, for every 2 habitations, we had 3 water bodies. So this civilization gave more importance to water bodies than to habitations. And who were controlling the water bodies? collectively, not the men. The men's job was to toil on it. It was controlled by the women. That was what kept the civilization going. So today we speak about women's empowerment. You have taken it out of the grasp of women, and then you go on stage and speak about women's empowerment. The real empowerment is to give it back to her. And there was a community that all across India that maintained these water bodies right from Afghanistan to Burma, from Ladakh to Sri Lanka. Are we aware there was a community?
This is the saddest story.
Part of it. They were interested by the civilization all across the land to maintain, keep in good repair all the hydraulic water bodies of land. They were hydraulic civil engineers. Are we aware of them? I'll show you a slide now.
They were called the Oddas.
They were called the Oddas. Odda is a very honorific name. Unfortunately, after 1857, they became scheduled caste because all the water bodies were wrested out of their control of repair. And look at this. This is a community called Odda, an honorific, very wealthy community of this land. And look at what they did. I'll just show you one slide.
Sure.
Look at this. This had a name across everywhere. And look at India's look at this. When we speak of Krishna, we say Damodara, right? Because the word Uddara means stomach, pot. Uddara means stomach, pot, belly, etc. Okay? Odiya, Jasma of Ud, Odiya, Udaga Mandalam, everywhere, Oda. Because Dedru Oda in Sri Lanka, Wadi, Wadiya, Ud, Odak, everywhere. And what are brothers and sisters called? Sahodara, Sahodari. Because they come from the same water belly of the mother, Uddara. So water spoon is called Uddarani. A stream is called Odai. A boat is called Odam.
Odai, yeah.
And something like damp is called Odam, right? All across the land. So they were people who built right from the Mehergar to all the valves and baulis of the land. Look at the
names of these communities actually, they all sound very similar. In Andhra Pradesh, you have Vaddera, Vadde, Vadderaju, Vaddila. And then here in Karnataka, you have Vadda, Vaddar, and Kerala, Odda, Oddan, and Tamil Nadu, and Odia, Vaddar. And, Vadi also, if you really look at it, it is a channel of water. And very surprisingly, if you look at the Vadiyas, who were actually shipbuilders, fundamentally some of the most famous shipbuilders, the pioneers of shipping in India are the Vadiya family. And even the word Bhovi, they come from Bhavi in Karnataka and Telugu, in Kannada and Telugu, which means well. And this is amazing. The King Karavela in Kalinga, he himself claims descent from an Odda. And this is mentioned in one of the inscriptions.
In the Hatikumpa inscription, he mentions that he calls his community Sri Odde. So it's a very prestigious, respectable community. And all waters, all waters all over the world is called Ud.
Vodka comes from the word, Voda, Od.
The famous Russian drink, Vodka. Where is the word from? It's an Indian word.
Because it's actually made from distilled water.
Ka is water. Aqua. Ka is water. Aqua ka. So two waters, distilled water. So Vodka. It's an Indian word. Olga, the Russian river. So Od is a community of people who maintain the water bodies of land, and they had 950,000 water bodies to maintain in good repair, which is what they did.
If the civilization owes anybody anything, it is to this community. The single community, Odda community, this Odda Jati, actually, let's use the right word. Let us not be afraid of using words like Jati. Jati is not bad. Look at the marvelous work this Odda Jati has done. They have kept this civilization flourishing for millennia. Oh my God, I'm getting goosebumps, when I'm talking about it.
So,
for millennia, they've kept this. And today, very sadly, a Kallu Bovi, a Mannu Bovi, you look at the matrimonials and all that, you will find all these people, they have been set aside as
scheduled caste.
Very
unfortunately, the most prosperous community of this land, who are the prosperity givers of this land, whom 1/3 of the harvest was given because they maintained, supplied water to every field, every square field they supplied water, ensured water reached. So they got 1/3 of the value. what's happened to them? They become scheduled castes because in 1857, all the water bodies were plucked out of their hand and put into some dusty fire. And in 150 years, that whole community which sustained the civilization for 5,000, 7,000 years is slashed out.
And the water bodies have also become dusty now. There is no water in those bodies.
Because you literally removed the roots out of this civilization, the water providing root of civilization. So if you want to talk anything about economy, about sustainability, of survival, about environment, ecology, we need to get back to our waters.
We therefore, we always...
Is it water or is it vodka?
We can't make
water.
Actually we say something.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, I know. But we say something, today, if we look at our philosophy world over, it is to be economically viable and ecologically friendly, right? Anything today, if we write any report, we say we are environment friendly, we are very environment friendly and all that. And when we talk about our businesses, we say, it's a very viable business. We are economically very viable. I mean, that is how, even in CSR, you will say that, economic viability and environment friendly. But if you look at all our acts, all our philosophy, it has always been ecologically viable, economically friendly. Ecology has always been viable. And when you say viable, there is a wealth of meaning in that word viable. See, when you just make what you have put in, then, you have kind of broken even, you break even. And if you generate something a little more, then you have become profitable. But it is only when you make lot more than you've put in, then you say it is viable. When you say put in, you put in all forms and it is worthy enough and is justifiable enough, then you say it is viable. So when you say today I'm only economically viable and ecologically just friendly, it's just incidental. But when you say I'm ecologically viable, unless you shift into that mode, there is no talk about sustaining at all, sustainability at all. You have to put in and get back a lot more, and it should be worth it.
I'll show you a slide for that now. Just a second. And Chaitra-ji, thank
you
so much for your
slide up.
One more slide.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just want to also talk. This reminds me of a very interesting conversation and an article that's been written by our good friend Anurag Saxena. He's written about a topic called dharmikism, where he talks about Shubh Labh. And how it's a very interesting concept. I found it very fascinating of how he says that economic benefit, it has to be Shubh Labh. It's not just Labh, right? It should be ecological. It should do good overall. The objective is not to just gain financially, but to do an overall good. It's a very fascinating study. Something that I would encourage all our listeners to also quickly Google, and we'll also find an opportunity to publish it on our social media channels. A very interesting talk, an article on dharmikism by Anurag, and something which I was able to easily connect back with as you were talking about it. Very, very fascinating.
It's an excellent article. I would urge all to read that article by our good friend Anurag Saxena. It's well written, it's well articulated, and the point has been brought out well. Now we just take you on to this point about eco model, which we mentioned in our book, which we had shared with you. So we just take this point out. It's called eco model, because we hardly speak about this nowadays.
Yeah. And once it's ready to share, I'll.
Yeah, it's there. It's there. Look at this.
Just one second. I haven't shared.
No, you're not seeing the screen yet.
It's comes.
Correct. Yes, Hariji, Hema-ji, over to you.
Yes. There it is.
See, just this tilt, where do you give a higher stress? The balance of economically viable and ecologically friendly to ecologically viable and economically friendly. It's just, tossing the coin over.
See, so what is important? You should have an eco model, and you should know which is the balance. Whether earth is the balance or the rupee is the balance. Because rupees flow every 10, 20 years, it changes direction. But earth stays
Sure.
with terra firma with you always across generations. So we should know which is important. Earth that we live in, ecology we live in, the Bhuma Devi that we live in, that's the only feminine planet. So that's what we live. So that is what is we have to give. That is sustainable, because what is sustainable at the end of the day? What is it that we're going to give to our children better than what we inherited from our parents? That's sustainable.
Sure.
So are we economically sustainable or ecologically sustainable is a question. So eco model is a very good balance. We have written about this in the book for all to check. Yeah, next.
Certainly, sir. So actually, one thing which I find very fascinating about what I've been hearing so far from the three of you is, in general, all of us want to be like what is celebrated, the celebrities. Right? If we celebrate six pack, then a lot more people want to have six pack. If we celebrate a rich person, all of us want to be rich. And what is fascinating from whatever I've been hearing so far is how, in core Indic philosophy and gold Indic principles, what was celebrated as a system was in general very woke, very sustainable by itself, and therefore it was in the DNA of all the people. It's absolutely fascinating that we had the core principles and we focused and we were celebrating and enjoying, appreciated people who did things right, and that's absolutely fascinating. So I'll just quickly move on. I had a couple of questions, Rahulji. Again, maybe let me start this with you. Question for you is
just one Shashankji, just 1 second. Since you were talking about
Sure.
what was celebrated, just one liner, a quip, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
What was celebrated was water. What and water. So celebrating water fundamentally.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sure, no problem. And Rahulji, this is the question I had, and I thought it would be good to get your views on. Was and being again a left brain guy with a little bit of data bent in my head, so the question therefore would have that flavor. Is what is it that we are not measuring, but we should? Is there a view that you have on that, something that we are not measuring? Is there a metric, or is this it could be a standalone number, or it could be something as a combination of correlating two metrics together and therefore comparing it? So would you have any thoughts or views on what is it that we should have been measuring but we're not?
I probably can't give you, Shashank, I can't give you the answer that you might like to hear because your data reveals and you want to hear a data answer. My answer would be, we are trying to measure too much, and
Okay.
even with what we are measuring, we don't know what to do with.
Okay.
We don't know what to do with the numbers that are coming out of the things that are being measured.
Sure.
We are measuring simply because we have the means to measure. We have devices, gadgets, satellites, sensors, all sorts of things, the Internet of Things to give us measures. We don't know whether any of those measures have meaning anymore. I think there's, I certainly wouldn't like to see India going down, well, it's already pretty far down, the route of saying that we have a measure for everything that happens in our society, in our economy, in our ecology, and we know what's right and we know what's wrong. The short answer is no, you don't, because the questions that lead to measures being invented and therefore followed with some instrument or the other are, in my view, necessarily very limited ways of considering what is measuring. Why are we even going down that route? I'm sure that everything that, for example, BharathGyan has produced, which describes what this civilization has been and has done for the last 5 millennium, have not been done by societies that have obsessed with measures. They have rather been more focused on are we living nicely? Are we living well? Are we living with the dharmic fundamentals that our children are following, that our society is following? So these
Sure.
are things that we don't necessarily want to turn into numbers and transform into data and
Sure.
keep peppering. What do they call it nowadays? Dashboards. They call it dashboard. We don't want to do
Reports
that.
and dashboards. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
we really don't want to do that. That's not the way our civilization thinks. Our civilization is used to not used to thinking in terms of a monthly dashboard and a quarterly report. We are used to
Sure.
think, we are used to being able to think in terms of many generations ahead,
Mm-hmm.
uh, keeping in mind that we have the collective memories of many generations before us. So
Sure.
I think that we have to draw the line somewhere at what we want to measure, because to my mind many of these are meaningless. We've been measuring things for the last 100 years. We have I would say swallowed or have thrust down our throats measures in the form of the entire gamut of what is called metric, when we
Sure.
never needed metric. We had a whole range of our own ways to deal with weight, volume, mass, speed, and especially time.
Yes.
Especially time. We never had the 60-minute hour. Why do we have a Shukla Paksh and a Krishna Paksh? So these sort of things. Why have we continued to adopt a calendar that is so fundamentally, so critically flawed,
Flawed. Yeah.
uh, when we have our own means of reckoning with meridians? So none of this really has been given, nor has it received the kind of attention that our society should have given to it by now.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
so, well, measures, forget about it.
Sure, Rahul. So I take it, and I'm actually going to be committing a sin now, because I'm going to start moving towards the conclusion of this conversation. I just don't want it to happen. It's been a fascinating conversation, and if I tell you that we are 57 minutes plus into the conversation, I'm hoping that, like I am surprised, the two, three of you would be surprised as well. So basically, I have one parting comment request from all of you, is if there is one policy or a reform change. I know it will be difficult to summarize it in 1 second or in 1 minute, but if in 1 minute each, if you could call out one highlight change as a policy or a reform that the country could do, or we as individuals could do, and if there is one that you would want to call out as a wish list or something that you think is required, it'd be good to know, and we could go across the floor. We can start with Hemaji, Hariji, if you have any thoughts, and then we'll go to
No,
Rahulji.
thank you,
We'll,
Shashank.
we'll just give you one twinned reply.
Okay, I'm just loving this. Absolutely loving this.
This is what I think we have to do today.
We just speak more 1,000 words, right? This is more than 1,000. It's 1,000 solid, strong words.
Absolutely. We have to give back the forest to the Vanavasi, not the Adivasi, the Vanavasi. They are the people who have been living there. They know how to take care of the forest. We have to bring them back into the equation of looking after the forest, and we have to bring back the knowledge, the traditional wisdom in managing waters.
And give it to the
Sure.
women to manage it, and to the traditional communities to maintain it. That must be done.
Absolutely.
And then we can have a prosperous India from multiple perspectives.
Sure, Hariji. This is fascinating. I often say that my house is running well because I don't interfere with the way my wife runs it. I think I get what you're saying. So Rahulji, if you had one concluding thought / reform or policy change that you would recommend, or a change that people could do, any concluding thought from you?
Yeah, well, reform is a much abused word for the last 30 years. It's been used as a fig leaf for all sorts of abominable decisions. But if you ask me to use reform, I would say we need to reform our way of thinking about what we are making rules for, and we need that reform really to begin with what the colonial administration left us with. Of course, in terms of water and forests, certainly, but also I would say with lands, what is our conception of land that is usable or productive and what is not? It is because of the colonial administration that we have a category called wasteland and scrub land and uncultivable land, which is supposed to mean, or which is taken to mean, or which is inferred to mean land that is of no use to any prani, any living creature, and which then can be used at will by the powers that be. So this is completely untrue. All these lands which appear to be not cultivated have distinct uses. And it is our nomadic and pastoral communities that know this best. The Gujjar, the Bakarwal, the Dangar, and so on. So, we need a fundamental reform of what the colonial administrations left to independent India, which independent India simply took up because it was a format that was convenient and that led itself to being assimilated into a body of law that we continue to follow and continue to expect others to follow. So I think that is what I would suggest. We need to go back 100 years and look at all this and junk what doesn't belong to our civilization.
Super, Rahul. That's been very great. Thanks for your insights and thanks for all of you for all your talks. This has been brilliant. I've learned so much. It's going to be very hard for me to say that we'll have to conclude this here. I just think we should do this once again, do the maybe version 2 sequel and maybe multiple sequels to this conversation. It's been brilliant. Thanks so much once again, Hariji, Hemaji, and Rahulji for taking time out and joining us. I'm hoping that the listeners have found this conversation useful and have taken something back that they'll apply in their lives as well as understand our philosophies and principles better. Thanks again for all of you for joining us. Looking forward to the next data talk in a short while. And thanks again. Appreciate it on behalf of Data Reveals. Once again, thanks to three of you.
Thank you very much.